For those who would like to do the Pledge of Allegiance, let's do that now.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen. All right, good evening. Welcome to a special meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. It is November 21st, and time 6:02 p.m., and I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee Davis.
Here.
Trustee Cranker.
Here.
Trustee Harper.
Here.
Trustee Bierman.
Here.
Trustee George.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Here.
And Mayor Furman.
Here.
Everybody's in attendance.
Wonderful. Right. Do we have any revisions to the agenda this evening?
We do not.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll now open up for public comment. We do not have anyone here in person, so if you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand button and we'll promote you to panelist. We ask that you introduce yourself and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Doesn't look like we have any public comments. We'll close this public comment period and move on to our first agenda item, which is continued business from the November 14th, 2022 regular meeting. And the first item is 5A, 2023 budget public hearing notice with draft budget presentation.
And so I'm presenting the updated draft budget for 2023 a week earlier than in previous years. The goal is to give you and the public adequate time to review the budget and give opportunity for comment on November 28th meeting, rather than having comment during the 12th meeting where we're supposed to adopt it. So in your board packet, there's a list of changes to the budget since it was first presented on October 10th. And I've also included a narrative to help break down the numbers and kind of show how the budget addresses the master plan of priorities as well. I think that was asked of me. There are also documents that the trustees have requested in previous meetings, including giving more context to the breakdown of administration fees, breakdown of our intergovernmental agreement with San Juan County, and a look at our long-term liabilities as well. So this notice is for public as well as the opportunity for me to check in with the trustees to make sure that our budget reflects our goals and the master plan. For this agenda item, no motion is needed for to continue, but if it elicits staff direction, we are here to take that.
Any questions or comments?
Well, I believe it's 2 meetings ago now we went over so is this including like the people who are asking for money, or is that the next agenda item?
So there is a placeholder for the nonprofit request. That is our next agenda item. And it is a placeholder too for a capital improvements program of $25,000 contributed this year. So, and I did include, which I won't include in our final adoption, all my notes on the side, just so to give you guys context of why I budgeted where I budgeted. And as you can see, we are spending down our fund balance significantly. While we had planned on spending it down this year, we did not. We actually increased our fund balance again this year. So this is another attempt to spend down our fund balance on some really big key projects, as well as budget accordingly for potential grants that we might receive. And I think those are 2 of the big areas that are kind of big spending areas. But I also wanted to point out that the refuse fund has some issues with it being sustainable. And after talking with the accountant extensively, there are options for us to reabsorb that into the general fund. We can make a full transfer over this year. It does prevent us from taking out any capital lease purchase or any kind of capital improvements loan that we would consider. But I don't see that happening in the next 2 years, and that's what it would prevent us from doing if we kept it as an enterprise account. So it's quite a significant kind of transfer over to the refuse fund, but this will get us back in the black. And then we do have some ideas on how to recover those costs in the future, which we will be presenting to you all soon, but probably not in the next 2 meetings, unfortunately.
The only comment I had related to the partner organization contributions in the general fund expenses, but I think those are better in the context of our nonprofit and partner organization request discussion later on tonight.
Yeah, so I did kind of the max of what we could potentially spend there, and then we can make those decisions tonight.
Great.
Any other questions?
Anyone on Zoom?
Not from me, but have you had any public input, Gloria, that's just come through you or through email or any other additional public input that we may not have heard in the public comment period on the budget?
Not yet. I am hoping that this might elicit some public comment. And it has been published in the paper as well. Notice that we are currently going through this public process for the budget. So next opportunity for the public would be on the 28th to comment, give their comments during public comment on the budget. And then they're always welcome to email me as well, and I would be happy to share those with you. Okay.
Nice. All right, anything else on this before we move on? Great. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, 5B, second reading for adoption of ordinance 2022-11, an ordinance of the town of Silverton for a limited rezoning and amending the official zoning map regarding property known as lots 9 through 12, block 2, Reese Edition.
And since we published this in the newspaper for the second reading of the ordinance, we have not received any public comment regarding this zone change. It is a limited zone change. I think we've talked about it quite a bit, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I told Lucy she didn't have to come present tonight since this is the second reading.
So on this one, unless we have any questions or comments, we'd be looking for a motion to approve this second reading.
I'll make a motion to approve the second reading of ordinance 2022-11, create an economic development overlay district for lots 9 through 12, block 2, Reese Edition, and authorizing the exclusion of the limited use agreement.
1 second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Davis.
Yes.
Trustee Crinkle. Trustee Crinkle.
Sorry, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Trustee Harper.
Yes.
Trustee Bierman.
Yes.
Trustee Jordan.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Martin.
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes.
Approved unanimously.
Thank you. All right, our next agenda item is 5C, nonprofit requests and partner organization requests.
All right, so this is our second year implementing the nonprofit budget requests. We started this process last year in an attempt to budget more accurately for contributions to organizations that help serve our community. This year, we received over $90,000 in requests from 14 organizations. This has since been reduced to 81,000 since KSJC redacted their request for funding a shuttle service. The Finance Committee has recommended to fund 50,462 out of the nonprofit line item and move 15,000 to partner line item. Organizations presented to the trustees at the November 7th work session, but since not all of the board was present and there was a lot of information to digest from that meeting, we waited until tonight's meeting for a final decision. And I'm happy to share my screen to walk us through this. Let me just grab that while you guys dive into this.
I've been thinking about how to facilitate this since there's a bunch of moving parts. And my thought is, you know, if we each take a turn providing comments, and I imagine that the first one or two people will probably provide a majority of the comments. And then as we progress, the people towards the end of the discussion can just provide the like iterations or conflicts with previous comments rather than doing the full line by line overview. So whoever goes first, I think, is going to do most of the talking.
And I'm happy to guide us through using the spreadsheet on the screen. This seemed to help out when we did it with the Finance Committee and kept us kind of on task. And then we can always see our final number at the bottom there. So I guess the first one would be Center for Snow and Avalanche Studies.
I'm happy to kick us off with a few comments. I'm not sure I am willing to take on the entire task that Shane lined out there, but I'll start.
So actually, it sounds like Gloria suggested maybe just going line by line.
Oh, sorry.
And that might be easier for her to keep track as well. So I take back what I said and let's just do one at a time. So CSAT. Okay.
Can I ask Gloria a couple questions, framing questions before we go into this line by line?
Always.
Gloria, last year, what was the amount that was requested? Do you know? I know that we have this in front of us, but maybe just for people at home who are watching and maybe aren't as up to speed on these, can we just, you referred to, this is the second year of the program. We know what our general number is about $95,000 or $90,000 in requests. We've budgeted $40,000 for this in our budget. Last year, I think our requests were around $40,000 in total, and we awarded $40,000. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, I do have a final number here of 57,000, and this includes our partner organizations. So we haven't, I think we do need more definition on what constitutes a partner organization versus a one-time nonprofit. In this case, how we delineated that was if we had a contract with them or or we're working on an MOU with them to provide a service, basically. But I do feel like, you know, for next year, we need to work on those parameters of what constitutes a partner versus a nonprofit.
Great, thanks. And before we go line by line, can we just name our partner organizations that we have with the town, between the town and an organization with which we have a contract or an MOU?
Sure thing. And I think I included this in your packet. I just want to find it real quick.
Let's just line it out maybe before we get started.
Let me find it. Almost there. Include it in this packet. I know I've included it in previous packets, but it is outlined in your budget, which I can find real quick. I would say I'm off the top of my head, but I don't want to miss it. Okay, so we have Region 9 and the Southwest Cog, because they have combined now. And we are giving them $1,697. The Small Business Development Center, $400. San Juan Development, traditionally we've done $5,000. Planning Commission, 500, and then we have scheduling in there is at 5,000, but this year they've requested an additional 10.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You have that summarized in the budget memo.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay.
I knew I had it somewhere.
Yeah.
I know, same. I just couldn't get my finger on it quick enough. Thank you, Gloria.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Did you have any other framing questions?
I don't.
Okay, cool. All right, so CSAS requested 2,000. Last year's award was 1,500, and the recommended amount by the Finance Committee is 2,000. Any comments or objections to the Finance Committee recommendation?
Do we know why it went up $500?
In there, so I have their request here. They asked for station maintenance, calibration, data management, and reporting. And they doesn't look like they described why they needed an additional 500 relative to last year. Which was a similar scope in terms of what the funds were for. My only comment is that, which I think will happen in the future, which is that it feels like CSAS is more in the category of partner organizations, despite the dollar amount being small, rather than it being like how I think of the nonprofit request. But I think for this year that this works well.
Can you explain partner versus not? I guess I'll take the, I don't fully get that.
So, and it is kind of new to think about, but we were thinking partner organizations were organizations that we had like a memorandum of understanding with, or a contract with, or helps us provide a service like Southwest Cog or Region 9. But we don't have that written down anywhere. So
like, why would CSAS? What would they? Because what do you think they provide us? I mean,
I wouldn't say that CSAS currently fits within the scope of partner organizations as it's defined right now, but I think that we could create more clarity and kind of limit the nonprofit request to something more specific than it currently is. But I don't think it's currently there. The reason I think CSAS feels more like a partner organization is they're providing like a regional benefit with their like data analysis of things. You know, a meaningful part of the community relies on the information they're providing. And it's not directly like a consumer related thing. Consumer is the wrong word, but it's like the radio, like we all listen to it, the farmer's market, we go shop at it. The creative district puts on events and does other things that like touch most of the community members, whereas like San Juan Development and CSAS are doing like higher level things that benefit the whole community, but not as a like direct to consumer feeling way. And consumer really means citizen, but.
I wondered too, Gloria, in parallel with this conversation, if you could outline the requirements or the criteria for making a request as a nonprofit organization. I know you clarified that you don't have to be 501c3, but do we have any other criteria for the application, just in contrast to or as a comparison for partner organizations?
So the only thing that we have written down is on the application, and it says nonprofit and community organizations located in the town of Silverton and serving the community. The town will be appropriating 500 to 10,000 for nonprofit support in 2023. And that's all the parameters that we had lined out.
Okay, thanks.
And I think also when we were reviewing this in the finance committee, one of the things that we considered when thinking about whether or not it was just a one-time grant application or whether we should make them a partner is it going to be an annual ask, and is it going to be close to the same amount? And Jim or Dana can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was one of the things that I really took into consideration. Do they provide, like Shane said, a benefit yearly to the community, and can we expect them to continue to come and ask us for around the same amount of money? And then I think it's cleaner and easier if we can make them a partner organization, and we just know that we're going to move forward supporting them, and then we can have we can certainly review whether or not they're still providing the service. But that was one of the ways that I feel like we were looking at it on the finance committee.
Tyler, so just to clarify, when you mean like a one-time ask or an annual ask, giving preference for which one?
Not giving preference so much as, CSAS is, going to be here. It's not like a one-time event that will be shut down. Like say, if we have another COVID, maybe ski touring can't happen that year. And maybe that's a bad example because we've considered making them a partner as well. But, they're certainly going to be serving us for years and years to come. And I think it's safe to assume that given their past of applying for these grants and about the same amount in the ask, that we could expect them moving forward to continue to ask for that money and then also provide our community with that service.
Nice. I had one other thought to just share on the categorization. I feel like in the past or last year, we offered 40, we were asked for 40, we awarded 40. This year we set a budget of 40 again that we increased to 50, but we were asked for almost 100. And so I think that as we can probably expect the dollar amount of requests to continue increasing, maybe not as drastically, maybe not doubling every year, but as it increases, we're probably going to need stricter criteria in order to help decide what gets awarded and what doesn't. But I think, the finance committee did a stellar job skinnying down the list, which is great. Okay, so CSAS, we're good? Cool. KSJC?
All good.
Mm-hmm. My thought here was I like the suggestion of the town buying a PA system. As long as we're running Kendall, it seems like something that could generate additional revenue pretty frequently, and that it could be loaned out for free to KSJC when they want it. That was my only thought there. It's not a huge dollar amount, so we also could do both, but it seems like investing in a town PA system while we also host events and have Columbine Park and other things like that could be good.
And I think after suggesting that, we talked to KSJC and they would prefer their own. And then when I was talking to Todd and he had talked to Lisa Branner about our needs for summer sound, this particular one that they had in mind would not serve what kind of a larger one. We would need a more robust one on our end.
I guess that was going to be my comment, is $1,300.
That's like one of those little, like those.
Yeah, that's
like what we used to have in here.
Yeah, like one speaker and.
Yeah.
But I really liked the mention of the ski team in that request. And so if we can just keep that on the landscape for this one, I really appreciated that use for this system.
Yeah, maybe it's kind of the reverse way of thinking about it. If KSJC is thinking about really wanting their own, if we fund it, maybe we just say town can use it for certain events when requested in advance. or something like that. But it's slightly conditional. Like if we fund them for it, we are able to use it if we're doing a night skiing at Kendall and we want to have a little bit of music, or we're doing a ski race or a family day at Kendall, or I don't know, something that maybe it's possible for the town to occasionally use it. Instead of the town owning it and the radio station using it, the radio station own it and the town could use it.
Cool. Everybody feel good? Great. Farmers market. Any objections? I can't see Tyler anymore, but I assume Tyler isn't.
No, I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Oh no, it's the way that we have the screen showing with the screen share. You were the bubble that was missing.
And now you just popped up.
No,
Okay.
Very good. Thanks.
You knocked Jim off the screen. Okay, cool. So then we move on to Powerhouse.
Silverton Creative District.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We move on to Silverton Creative District. The ask was for 10. They got 10 last year. Finance Committee is recommending 7,500. Would someone on the Finance Committee want to provide the basis for not providing the full amount?
I can speak up and just say that I don't recall the actual discussion. It happened a while back. But there was a robust discussion and there was a reason for it. There you go.
Oh,
comments.
that's the one I didn't put a comment on.
I imagine, if I have to guess, that there's a lot of pressure to cut the budget somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think.
Sorry, T, go for it.
Well, I think maybe one of the reasons was, one, we were trying to stay within the budget that we had, but also in their grant, if I'm not mistaken, they had listed a number of things that they were going to use the grant monies for, and I believe 7,500 covered the a lot like the Powerhouse. It covered like the top 3 out of their 4 requests, and we're going to see that again with some of these other grant asks. I don't. None of these were just arbitrary. We didn't just say, "Well, let's just give them 3/4." And so I believe that that's what we did on that, and that's also what we did on some of the others.
Thank you, T. That is correct. The Creative District, the Powerhouse, and I believe the help me out here. It's a little further down. The
Maybe
clinic. Thank you. It was the clinic.
I think the
the
film
clinic
office
was the third one.
or the clinic. Yeah. So there were several that had, like I said, a list of items, and we tried to fund as many as we could while staying under the budget.
My individual preference would be to fund the full amount. They're one of the most active organizations in town. They're involved in a lot of stuff that greatly benefits the community. So maybe we can put an asterisk by this one to come back to if we end up cutting something else. Because I'm not trying to increase the overall recommended dollar amount beyond the 50,462. But if we skinny something else down, maybe we can bump this one up.
I agree. I'm in favor of funding the Creative District as fully as we can, and because they are so active, because they are also providing services to the community in somewhat of a capacity that the town itself can't take on. This one is one where I have a question about partner organization. And I know we don't have a contract or an MOU with them, but they are providing services that, and just community kind of quality of life.
And we do have
Sorry.
a contract with them for Summer Sounds. So this is an ask outside of their summer sounds of 10,000.
And this is an addition.
But that
to
doesn't come out of the
formula.
partner. I should clarify that doesn't come out of the partner line item. It had already been budgeted as a different line item, so that comes out of I think it's in the events and communications, and it's for some entertainment, and it's $10,000. That is where the summer sounds has traditionally come out of, and we can look at combining those in the 2023 budget if you would all want me to put that in partner organization, or if you'd like me to keep summer sounds separate, we can do that as well.
So if we were to make it look like Summer Sounds was a subset of Silverton Creative District, we'd be looking at awarding them 17.5.
Correct.
Does that change your opinion?
No.
Yeah.
I think of Summer Sounds as its own thing, and I'm grateful that the Creative District took that on, as opposed to being like a subset of the Creative District that they created, and now they're asking for more budget.
Yeah, their overall trajectory seems to be absorbing more and more as they become a more established organization in the community, not less and less. But I can see where the numbers have, I can see how you arrived at this number, and I guess I just wanted to say I support funding them as close to the full amount as we can.
I also want to make a note here too, that I really appreciated the depth of their presentation and kind of reporting back to us. And so maybe as we think about how to manage these requests in the future and what we expect of these partners for kind of accountability and transparency, I really appreciated what the Creative District and San Juan Development Association gave us as far as reporting and just presenting on how the money had been used here as well. So I think that demonstrated a lot of great accountability and partnership.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think that their ability and accuracy to administer previously awarded grants is something that we could consider adding to the grant application. I know that a lot of the grants that we write for the ambulance, we apply for them every year, and how accurately we use the previous monies is always taken into consideration.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like we might circle back to that line item at the end of the conversation. The next one is Powerhouse. Request for 7,500, and the Finance Committee recommends funding the top 3 priorities rather than the full scope, which is 5,500. And those top 3 priorities are a little funky to break down. There's a seasonal speaker for 3,500, which looks like it's for 4 events, and then there's 4 monthly series: winter, spring, summer, and autumn. That are 1,000 each.
Yeah, so I think we tried to fund the first speaker series, which is the 3,500, and then 2 additional speakers. Again, just trying to, as we went through, we did a real rough outline, and then when we looked at the total amount that we had, already tried to approve on that rough draft, we realized we needed to go back through and try and cut some of them. That's where that cut came.
So as I'm looking at this closer, it looks like the actual application is only for $7,500, not for 10. So that would actually be funding the full amount that was requested.
Oh, so their request was 7,500 and 5,500 was.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
My bad. Sorry, Dana, I interrupted you. Please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was also going to say, Gloria, it might be worthwhile just double checking with some of the folks on this who are leading it. I know it is a new organization. There's a lot of great stuff happening there, but I also think they're a little bit going through a period of transition. So just maybe it's worth circling back to double check that they are still planning on the ability to execute the speaker series if we fund them for the certain number that we were thinking of. So that's a question mark in my mind that we may want to just double check on capability there.
And I did ask them right before the meeting on the 7th, and they said yes, they were planning on still doing their speakers series.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So everybody's good with the 5,500? Sweet. Silverton Clinic, request for 6448. They received 10,000 last year. The Finance Committee recommends doing 4648 in order to not fund the electronic records portion.
Yeah, and this was another pretty specific. We were pretty specific in the reason we declined, in that they need the computers and the software to run a EPCR, an electronic patient records system, but there are several of those offered through the state for free, and so we thought that if we could get them the hardware and software to run the programs, they might be able to do some light work and find some of those state offered programs.
I think too, you guys know I've been pretty vocal on this, on kind of how we support this group, and also how we add a little bit of transparency and accountability here. I appreciated their members of their board coming to present to us. And from my perspective, it would be seriously detrimental for something like the Silverton Clinic to not be able to operate and to not be serving members of our community. I think with this partner, I'm just still looking for a sustainability plan for the future. And so if this is something that kind of gets them to a place where they can think about what the 5-year plan is, that's great. But just kind of a question mark here for me on what the future funding looks like, and making sure that there's a level of accountability. Because if we're talking about financial sustainability, obviously transitioning to be able to bill insurance would be important for that. But if they can't get there without an electronic health record, I think that makes a lot of sense. But I just really want to make sure that their board is clear on where they're going and how they're going to get there, and that their board is really able to move them in that direction. But I would definitely not want to see the clinic cease to see patients because of, $1,200 or something like that.
Everybody on board with that?
I disagree on this, and I think we should fund the electronic health record. I think kind of following the same logic, just the fact that I think supporting them now is more important than ever if they need that funding to make things run more smoothly, especially if there's a lot of people working there that potentially could transition out in the near future. I think having something like that already set up will make it a more attractive place to potentially go and work.
Yeah, I guess my question, I agree. I agree with that, where I feel like this is something this seems like a small ask in a bigger picture thing. And my question would be, those state run programs, like what's the benefit of, like, is there a huge benefit with this program they're requesting? Or does anyone know? Tyler, do you have any idea?
I don't, because they weren't clear on which program they were going to use. I do know paying for the service oftentimes makes it more streamlined, more intuitive, and the free services are they're a little more, they're funky, and the paid for services are typically easier to use.
I mean, it seems like health records and billing insurance is the way forward with the clinic. No matter, we should always think that the sustainability will continue, meaning that like we should plan for the clinic to continue to be here.
I think having a program that's more streamlined and faster to save you money and time in the longer run too.
So Dana, based on that input, what's your feedback to that?
Yeah, I don't disagree. Again, my point is like, I would hate to, it would be a terrible loss to the community for the clinic to not be able to operate in the near term. I still would like to see an expectation from the board for kind of what does the plan look like for the future. And I know they've lost a lot of board members, so I just have questions around the organization's structure and sustainability. But as far as daily operations, I don't disagree with Jordan and Jeff as far as this may be the direction that they need to go. I would just, if we continue to support them into the future, I just would like to see more accountability and transparency. But I don't disagree with Jeff and Jordan.
So are you persuaded to increase that line item to the full amount to fund the electronic record portion, or you still think that it'd be better not to?
Yeah, I think after I've thought about it a bit, I can be persuaded in that regard, especially if we're able to kind of work through maybe decreasing some of these other organizations in different areas.
I wonder too if we see if we can make a request back. I don't know how this works. This is so new, but if we look at this purchase, and if the clinic, like you say, Dana, if they've made the request, but they don't seem ready to purchase or implement in a, timely way, then they have the option to say, we're actually not ready for this yet. And so on that part of our request, we want to postpone for a year, give the clinic a little bit of say, well, we believe that this is important. We see this in your request, we can fund it. However, if at some point you think that this is not going to be fully implemented or not implemented to its highest degree or ability to be effective, then maybe this isn't the year that this system gets purchased. And the first step is just getting people online and figuring out the computer system in the clunkier way until it's ready to take off. Because I was sort of thinking along the lines of what Jordan was thinking. If it's newer in the operation of the board and the board is a little bit uneasy or not as savvy with technology as they stand now, they may just need the more intuitive jump start, and then that just works better over time, and then they have a better sense of precisely what will work going forward. So my input on this one would be to fully fund that whole amount if we can. Like Dana said, it's going to get harder and harder because we're going to get lower down and have less money. But this clinic just seems like something that fits right in line with our master plan. And we've just recently had a presentation sort of indicating that this is a priority for the organization. So it really directly relates to the health of the community. So I was in favor of the full fund.
It sounds like the majority of the board, perhaps the whole board, would like to fund the full amount.
Okay.
And I meant the full amount as the 6,000.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Cool. So Silverton Single Track Society. Any objections? Okay. Silverton Film Office. Request for 10. Last year's award of 5. Finance Committee recommends 7,500, but also there's notes about requesting a 5-year plan, looking at them as a partner with an MOU.
And they did come to the presentation and give a 5-year plan.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, it was a great presentation. It was very detailed with the vision of how things are going to move forward. The film industry, I think one of the biggest things that they focused on is they do bring a lot of high-paying jobs and to areas for short periods of time and money to different areas. you know, I'm going to say looking at it, you know, like when we're looking to try to find $1,800 to fulfill the Silverton clinic, like data record keeping, to me, I feel like this is a place where we might be able to take some of those funds back. I hate to do that because, again, I think that they didn't really deserve that from their presentation, but to me, looking at these different organizations and what they bring to the community right now, it seems like it could be a place we could whittle it down a bit.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff.
My issue with this one is that I think it feels like it should be funded under the chamber as opposed to through this funding opportunity. I think it feels like marketing, really, to bring, and then administration of marketing. It's like bringing these things here that sometimes hire locals, but you know, also highlight town of Silverton in film. And maybe I'm thinking about it the wrong way, but it seems to me more like something that would be great to be championed by the chamber, for the chamber to develop a program that supplements the film office budget, and that the chamber provides that recommendation to the board to fund outside of this like nonprofit organization request. This year, you know, I think this is fine where it is, but in terms of it going through this process, but I think in the future, it feels like it is more aligned with the chamber's mission. And I also support reducing it slightly to make room for others. I think having the amount awarded to the film office be the same amount awarded to the creative district is a little imbalanced.
I thought you increased the creative district to 10,000.
We said we'd like to if we reduced other line items. We could also just independently say we're going to increase the creative district to 10 and not worry about the net amount staying the same.
I think we can. The thought process with the Silverton Film Office is investing in the community and investing in our future, not just looking at it right now or this fiscal year, but looking at it over the next 5 years. What does the film industry bring to the town of Silverton, to the county of San Juan? And how do you quantify that? How do you fund that? How do you invest in that? Right now, it's essentially one person doing all the legwork, bringing tens of thousands of dollars to our community, both in real money, recognized by our friends and neighbors, and also tax revenue that's recognized by the town of Silverton. The request was for 10. We looked at it and cut it down to 7,500 because we were wanting to help fund the other organizations and keep the money from growing. I understand if everyone's not on board with funding the Silverton Film Office, but I think if we're looking down the road, this is one of these investments that we can look back and actually track the growth from this $7,500 purchase, which is essentially what it is, just like all these other purchases.
I just want to clarify, the majority of my comment wasn't suggesting that we don't fund them. It was that I think it should come in through a different avenue of funding.
And I definitely wasn't suggesting getting rid of all of their funding. I was suggesting 7,500 feels like a lot for the same that we're giving the Silverton Creative District. I think that was a good way to put it.
I understand.
I saw it more. Oh, sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
No. Continue, Sally.
No. I want to hear your thoughts because I know that you were part of that original discussion.
We were, and we had the same discussion as we're having right now. It's the struggle of trying to see what we're investing in, just like a lot of these others. What are you investing in? What is our return on investment? this is one that we can definitely see. This is one that we see in film. This is one that you see on whether it's Amazon Prime or Netflix, in the form of the films that have been produced in our community. The fact of the matter is it is the Silverton Film Office is underfunded. It is a startup, essentially. It is way underfunded, and they are going and pursuing other avenues for funding, not just the town of Silverton. And I think, Shane, you're absolutely correct. This is something that also could be pursued through the county marketing budget, the annual marketing budget, which I believe they have and are pursuing those other avenues. So.
Yeah. Well, can I ask another, like a bigger picture question? Like we've created this constraint of like a target lesser amount than the total amount requested, in the $50,000 range. Is this all coming out of the general fund?
Yes.
Either way? And we just talked about how we didn't spend it down as much as we intended to. So I also think we do have some potential flexibility to not hold ourselves to exactly the 50,462. And if like, we're really just talking about like $1,000 to $3,000 increments in funding requests to like give these organizations what they've asked for, maybe we don't need to be so strict on the rewards across the board.
You are correct in that statement.
Okay.
I think with that point, I agree and I disagree, because in the same way that a family might manage their own home budget, and if we all go out for expensive coffee every day, it adds up a lot over time and you end up with a lot of expensive coffee. I think it's valid for us to say that we have some discretion in the budget, but I also think it's important to remember that we're talking about later in this discussion funding our capital improvement projects and thinking about what else at Kendall we're wanting to see happen, or what other assets in our community we're wanting to invest in. And so I want to make sure, at least from my perspective or opinion, that as we think about any surplus that we have as a town, we make sure that we also focus it on discrete investments and assets for our community that benefit a broad swath of our community. And I'm not saying investing in these partners and these organizations doesn't do that, but I'd hate to see us spend 5,000 here, 10,000 here, 1,200 here, and never get to like planning for a covered ice rink event pavilion, or investing in improvements at Memorial Park, or thinking about our visitor center complex. So that's just kind of my lens as well, is making sure that as we think about the surplus, we're not losing sight of some of the other projects around town that I think our community has been asking for and are our priorities too.
I totally agree. And I'm definitely not suggesting that we just fund these things willy-nilly. I think we should provide a lot of discretion on how we spend these dollars. But I guess my general like question and then point was that if we saw this amount go from 50,000 to 58,000, I imagine that all of these organizations put a lot of effort into thinking about what they need for the next year, and that they're hoping to get the full amount. I don't know that many of these are like trying to game the system where they're like, we hope to get 5, but we're going to ask for 7,500 because we know that they arbitrarily always cut it back. I imagine that that's not what they're doing. And so if we do provide less than the requested amount, it's going to take them a lot more effort to figure out what exactly they cut. So my point was just, if there's places where it feels kind of arbitrary to reduce it, like this film office discussion, to say like, instead of giving 10, we're going to do 7,500 just because it doesn't feel right, even though they provided quite a bit of planning and like historical benefit detail. Like it feels like the decision to not fund them the full amount is more arbitrary than substantive, just in order for us to save money.
That is
And again,
correct.
I think it's in the wrong category, but I do think they do a good job for the town. And I'm also totally on board with anybody who wants to fight about it and disagree.
I'm totally good with the 7,500. I think you're right though, in the future, potentially exploring other avenues to put them in, because it doesn't necessarily, depending on what they're asking for, it doesn't necessarily seem like a good fit in the nonprofit section like it is. But I'm totally fine with what they have presented for this year, and I think 7,500 is a good number.
All right, any final thoughts? All right, I guess we're holding 7.5. Senior Center, requested 2,000, Finance Committee recommendation of 2,000. Any objections? Cool. MSI and CSAS requested 20,000. Last year we were awarded 2,500 and the recommended amount is 2,500.
Yeah, and so Gloria, correct me if I'm wrong, but did they just ask for double the amount that our grant application states that we will award?
Yes, their justification was that it was a joint application.
Right.
With CSAS though, which is Center and Snow and Avalanches.
Which we already
Correct.
have granted money to. And so, yeah, one of my thoughts was that they didn't really, I mean, since CSAS put in its own application, coming back and then asking for double what we would typically give for a grant. I mean, I just feel like it was out of parameters of what we asked for when submitting a grant.
Was there any follow-up from them?
About what the funding was for?
Yeah.
Right. There was part of it was to help fund a graduate student.
Well, now that part was funded. It's actually to oversee the graduate student.
Oh, it's for.
Yeah.
More for like equipment, things like that.
Because I mean, their original application just says 10K for equipment, 5K for master student oversight funding, and 5K for labor. But I feel like to go from 20,000 to 2,500, like without really knowing what that 2,500 is for or going to do, it just doesn't feel like we can do it just because we know that MSI is a great community partner and done lots of awesome stuff. But like, what's the 2,500 getting used for? The 2,500 we did the year before was for the Animas Headwaters Action Division, and it was a specific request for a specific thing. And this feels like just general asking for money without a specific need.
From the presentation, it seemed like they wanted just a general, any money to leverage those funds to get other funding for them to use as matching funds. This is from my understanding of the 2,500.
Yeah, I'd agree with Jordan. It sounded like they were kind of happy for whatever we would give them, and they were asking for as much as they thought we could or would say yes to, and that any amount helps to show support so they can leverage funds for other requests. But yeah, they were just asking for as much as they could hope to be funded for.
And do we provide them any other types of funding elsewhere in our budget?
No, we do not.
Okay. Has there been any further conversations with them about creating a like Silverton Science Lab headquarters?
Not at this point. We do mention it in our master plan, but it's more working together, supporting MSI.
Yeah, I was kind of headed there. I don't think we should just arbitrarily increase or decrease, as we've, discussed in other cases, anyone's request just because, it feels because it's a relative choice or a general feeling that we're having. But I do think that looking at $10,000 as being the maximum, looking at MSI as an organization that's long established in the community, it certainly has other mechanisms for funding. And I think you can use that as an argument sort of in both directions. For some organizations, it's to me a reason to participate in their funding as a funding source for them because we know that they're healthy and that they are predictable and established and they have a functioning mechanism for giving back to the community and for being sustainable over long periods of time. I think the argument on the flip side is to give, to really well fund organizations that are kind of trying to get off their feet and get themselves established and, give them a little kickstart that they may need to become one of our more healthy and established organizations in the community. But this is one that we have specifically mentioned in our master plan. Like I'm going back to what we have in our packet here where Gloria is sort of lined out in purple. It says the purple section, strengthen our local economy, and it lists Silverton Single Track Society, supporting MSI, working with Region 9, and collaborating with the Silverton Creative District. So we're seeing all of these organizations listed here requesting funding, and to sort of, I think what we're struggling with potentially is the specificity of this request. It's like this idea of like, well, exactly what are you doing with the money and how is that going to impact our community? But I guess I would like to see us, if we can, if we're in the position to fund this organization in an effective way and show our support for them. So that number to me is something less than, 20,000 and more than 2,500. It's a nice range, huh?
I feel like if I was reviewing this as like a grant applicant, I would reject it, but I would ask them to resubmit with a more specific and responsible ask within the parameters of the original guidelines. And since we're a town, we're thinking about it a little differently, but I think I support MSI. I'd like to show the town support for MSI, but I think that this application failed and should be just rejected flatly. And they should have an opportunity to maybe ask for money again.
That's basically why I had the same view. I write a lot of grants, and I also sit on 2 other nonprofit boards, and we review and approve other grants. And if any of the grant applications come in and they're outside the parameters, we reject them outright immediately because it actually just makes our job easier. And if they can't follow the direction on the grant application, then we also may have questions about the administration of the monies later on. I'm not saying that about MSI. I think MSI and CSAS are both important organizations, but I think moving forward, I think it's going to be very important to put some new definitions around our grant process and supply them with better directions and information, and then we can have an easier time going through and accepting or denying based on how it was filled out.
I mean, I think that the recommendation of $2,500 by the Finance Committee shows how much you guys were trying to show support of MSI, because otherwise I think it would have just been rejected. But my suggestion is to go to 0 on this one and ask them to resubmit a specific request, and that we would, encourage them to do that.
Do you think their request would just come down to a more detailed, like, would we give them the same parameters of the $10,000 cap?
I hope so, but I don't know. I don't know what they'll do. Does that screw up anything budget wise if we ask them to resubmit something for 10,000 or less with more specificity?
No, the goal of the program was just to create a better way to budget. So if we have one off, that's not as bad as having
10 off.
10 off.
Yeah.
I think, Jim, you unmuted?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm just here.
Okay, hi.
So thoughts, am I being mean? Like, I don't know.
I would say I'm still in support of funding it just because we've had such a long-standing relationship with them, and like Tyler, I've also been on the other side of this a lot, of like working for organizations in which having any sort of flexibility in your funding is really rare, even though that's like what you need in your funding, especially for nonprofits. So you don't really know exactly what you're going to use it for always all the time. And being able to prioritize when you do have money that can be a little flexible can be really beneficial. But I definitely see it, they didn't go through and check all the boxes that we were expecting as far as an applicant.
Well, I guess what I'm understanding from Shane is you're just saying more like, we just took 20,000, said no to 20,000, maybe, and this is my assumption, and then looked at what we gave them last year, and then just pretty much gave them what we gave them last year. And maybe we can actually support them a little bit more if we have a better idea of the breakdown of like what they'd actually use $10,000 for.
Yeah, and I would totally support if they want to come back with a more detailed plan in which we could potentially fund them for more.
Yeah, ask them to iterate. We say like, we're not going to say yes to 20. That's double the amount that we have allocated per organization. Tell us how you'd specifically like to use 10 or less, and we'll review that just like we reviewed all the others. So it's not really like a full no, it's like a no to this, but please ask again now.
I guess that's more or less the point I was making. I'm not in favor of rejecting them and giving them $0, but I'd like to give them somewhere between what we've recommended and potentially what they could get with a better plan.
Jim?
Hey, thanks. The discussion that we're all having right now is exactly the discussion that we had during our finance committee meeting, which is why we just selected and agreed upon the 2,500, because that's what was awarded last year. Trying to justify 2,500 to $20,000 was a little bit difficult, and showing solidarity, showing support for MSI and all they do by awarding the 2,500 was our way of showing that, for lack of information. And I don't want to say an outrageous request of 20,000, but it's a lot more than anyone was expecting. And I'll say it. That's what was discussed.
Do you still feel like just doing a 2,500 award is better than saying like, or like, just rather than maybe not framing it as a no, but saying like, we didn't make a decision on your award. Would you like to resubmit a more specific application for 10,000 or less, and how you'd use it?
Speaking for myself and not the rest of the committee, I would not be in favor for that, because the parameters were, and the time frame was, and this is what they submitted. I think we're being very generous by providing $2,500. I think we are, and I think that shows support. It's what was awarded last year. We're providing that much this year, and if they want to follow the parameters and provide more details and check those boxes, as Jeff stated, yeah, maybe 20,000 is justified next year. But I think this year the door's closed on that one. That's my opinion. Nobody else's.
Understood.
I guess I would be interested to go back to have them resubmit and maybe I misinterpreted it about how much of the funding was going to go towards the graduate student in some capacity. And I wonder how much a town plays a role in supporting graduate students. Like, I think it's all great, but how much like towns play the role in that kind of.
Well, and that is a great question, Jeff, and it's the question that we were discussing during the meeting, and it was a very passionate conversation. The four of us, Gloria, myself, Tyler, and Dana. What is the role of a town and a municipality in funding smaller town-based organizations? And then what is the role of a town and a community the size of ours funding a multi-jurisdictional organization that gets funding from many sources? And I'm going to pick on the film office for a second. They're small. They are a 501c3. They are nonprofit, and they serve the town of Silverton, just like the Silverton Clinic, just like the Farmers Market, the Creative District. So it was difficult coming up with these dollar amounts. It was difficult having these conversations and knowing that a lot of us have relationships with these different organizations, and how can we show support to all of them while trying to be fair to all of them at the same time and trying to stay within a confined budget. Just additional insight.
I'm very nearly persuaded by the logic that the finance committee applied to come up with $2,500, but I think that whether it's $1 or $10,000, without knowing what it's being spent on, I can't say yes to it. Like, it's essentially a $2,500 donation to MSI to be used at their discretion, and I don't think that's what these funds are for. And that's why I think we need to say no, or we need to say no for now, but come back to us with a revised application. And Jim just really cemented my feeling of that by reminding me that they are multi-jurisdictional, and we could be funding them to go spend that money on, a Durango related project or something else. Whereas last year that $2,500 was for the Animas Headwaters. So we knew that it was specific to this community. So I'm a no for MSI's application right now.
I'll support
Yeah,
that.
it seems like, oh, sorry. It seems like not just for MSI, but for maybe all of these organizations, something we can work on and improve. If this is going to sort of operate on a larger scale than our $40,000 with, 4 organizations making requests, if this program, if we will, continues and it grows and it becomes more like a granting organization or a funder of sorts, then I think the town is responsible for providing criteria and direction for the organizations to know, what it's going to take for them to be successful in their ask. And so I see the perspective of like looking at this as a grant, through a grant framework, because it very much feels that way, but it's like a grant framework without any of the grant framework. So, but in this discussion, it seems like the trustees have been really clear, and I think the finance committee thinking is really strong and reasonable. The direction for organizations to go from here are to frame their ideas for their requests in, in a way that connects back to the community, back to the needs of the community, linking it to the master plan in some way. And so, if we were to design that criteria, we could, but at the very least, there's some, verbal direction for organizations that are applying at this point. So, I'm comfortable with $2,500 as a show of support idea, simply because I think it's on the town to provide the direction. If we don't like someone's idea, we didn't totally give the heads up there, but we also did provide really general parameters about, the maximum amount you can ask for and, what needed to be in the original application that isn't completely clear here. So, or didn't meet the original criteria. So, yeah, that's where I stand. I think 2,500 shows support and doesn't necessarily accomplish maybe what MSI wants to accomplish with this funding, but it's not a perfect system right now.
Is there resistance to just giving them a do-over? I really do think it's irresponsible to just give them $2,500 with total discretion and not knowing what it's being used for.
My only resistance has to do with town capacity, like the need to continue to administer this program beyond sort of the deadline of when the program needed to be over.
How do you guys feel about that? Does it strain your capacity? It's okay if it does.
I mean,
Would it strain somebody else's capacity? Not Gloria's.
Right.
A normal human.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's not just town staff, it's the board reviewing it again, right? We've reviewed this in finance committee. We've gotten a presentation from MSI. So half of this board has heard this. And then now we're talking about it again. I don't disagree with your point, Shane, but I think there are some organizations here where we don't have super line item budgets. So it's kind of tricky. I think, Sally, you made some good points that we haven't given super clear direction to these organizations because this is somewhat of a new process and approach to us. But I also sort of agree with the point of like, we can give them $2,500 and show support and move on and give clear direction next year if we have the funding to do so. So I really could go either way, but there is the capacity of just our meeting agendas talking about this again.
Okay. This strains the administration of this as well, but could we give them $2,500 that they can request with detail of how they plan to spend it at some point during 2023, and we will fund it as long as it relates in some way to Silverton? Since we don't know what they're going to spend it on right now.
Yeah, that seems like a good compromise.
Which I guess also is a bigger question of like, how is this administered? Like, do we just cut checks on January 1st, or do they make requests, based on the timelines provided in their applications, or how does the funding work?
so we have left it up to the applicant to request the funding that they've been awarded.
Got it. Okay, so if they have to request it anyway, can we just add that stipulation to their $2,500 that we'd like them to tell us how they're going to spend it, and we'll approve it as long as it relates to Silverton?
Sure, would you like that to come back through the board, or would that be administrative?
I think that could be administrative.
Okay.
What's everybody else? They're gonna with given that direction, if do enough here in town, they'll just put the things in here in town. So no, that won't be a problem. It'll just be more clarity for us. We're careful about that because we set that expectation. We have to set it for everybody.
Okay. Any objections to that?
No objections.
Cool. Okay. Theater group, $1,000. Sorry, $1,000 requested, $1,000 recommended. Any objections? Sweet. Ski touring, 10,000 requested, 10,000 last year. No recommendation included in the table, but the notes for full amount under partnership. More information needed from their funding sources, already committed 5K to partner and potential increase to 10K.
Actually, this would be a potential increase of 15K.
15K.
I can kick it off. I appreciated Ski Joring being available to share some information. I was just a little confused, and I don't feel like we got real clarity during the presentation on their budget. The budget they provided to us showed that their revenues, even if you don't include funding from the town of Silverton at any level, that their revenues exceeded their expenses. So I guess I'm just very unclear with this partner, how this goes moving forward. And I was kind of trying to orient myself to the previous board's discussion on this and the discussion around the film and using the film for marketing, and kind of the idea that they needed additional funding last cycle to sort of kickstart the fundraising efforts. So again, this one, I sort of have a lot of questions that I don't quite feel like have been answered. I think it's a super important event that brings a lot of people to town. And I know that the board has been trying to work hard to fundraise and to market. And I really appreciate those efforts, but I had a lot of questions on this that I didn't feel like were really resolved.
I'll go next. I'm pretty disappointed with what happened with the film. The reason that we provided that funding was because they said they were going to use the film to market and not need funding or as much funding in the future. I don't think the film ended up being what they said it was going to be, and it doesn't seem like it served the purpose it was supposed to serve, at least not yet. I don't see this as being a locals focused event, while I do acknowledge that it brings in money to local businesses. It's not like Summer Sounds where it's primarily locals participating and involved. And then there's also a significant in-kind cost that the town bears to use the snow plow and move all the snow onto Blair Street and all of that stuff. I'm in support of keeping it at 5K and not increasing it at all.
For me, a hard one with ski drawing is some of what Shane expressed in terms of just the discussion that we had last year around it. I think this event is, obviously we've shown a lot of support for it in the past, and it has been important for the community. I think when it first started, it definitely gave a good boost to the winter economy. I think over time that weekend has just become busier and busier, and so it doesn't have its same relative impact maybe that it did when it first began. And so while we're seeing Silverton's winters become a little bit more consistently busy, or having at least a little bit more going on than earlier, I think we're also seeing this organization, we've just seen it struggle to be consistent with the board and kind of pull off the event and be organized in its requests. And last year felt we had some really hard discussions with this group about who was doing what, and that this capacity, the load on a very few people was really too much. And it's great to see that, I've seen the boot and the fundraising in the community, and I think that's really important to make this a sustainable event for everybody. I think I have a hard time funding it at so much over the $5,000 partnership because the town provides a very significant amount of in-kind support for it. And then I also really have a hard time with the town providing money for a purse. And I think that the case has been made that this money is going to fund the purse, which is really what sort of propels the whole event. And I think that's sort of counter to what this nonprofit organization program is for, in my mind.
Other thoughts?
I kind of just reiterate kind of what Shane and Sally brought up too. I feel like we kind of went out on a limb and gave them extra support last year, and looking to kind of recoup on the film in a way in which they wouldn't need this type of funding in the future. And I feel comfortable just with the partnership that we already have with them.
I think the other thing, and this is maybe just a bit of a housekeeping issue for us, is that this does seem more like, I guess, yeah, I need to understand that partnership nonprofit organization status, because I think if we're in, the partnership to me is a link to that in-kind support piece of the support that we give this event. But then funding sort of above that feels a little bit more like nonprofit organization category. But in any case, I think, I just lost my other train of thought. If I think of it, I'll come back. Jordan expressed some of my thinking too. Oh, I know. I was thinking that if we are looking to fund, if we're looking at sort of rearranging some of these numbers, looking at organizations like the clinic, where we wanted to more fully fund their requests, the impact of those organizations is, I think, really direct to the community, and it connects to sort of health and well-being. And so, as we're looking at the bottom of our list here, I would like to see us being able to make good on how we funded some of the organizations that are doing their work on the day in, day out, week in, week out basis for the community.
Tyler, Jim?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what was said. Especially I was really disappointed with the promotional video and how that was handled. I do know that their board was going through, another sort of reshuffling and shifting of folks. But I do want to just point out that that it is a one weekend a year sort of deal, but coming from somebody that's seen some pretty slow winters, that it's for us when I was managing a bar restaurant, it was like 4th of July in the middle of when we needed it the most, and it really when they put it on, it does come through, and there the amount of business that it does bring to the town for that weekend it's staggering. And so I don't think that we should overlook that, because it does help a lot of our businesses that, depending on how the tea season was, or many other factors, that can be a weekend that floats them and helps them get through another difficult shoulder season and into the summer. So I would also add that I do sit on some, as I said, some other nonprofit grant boards, and they have been reaching out and they've applied for several other grants as well to try and make sure that they're not relying on the town for all of their money, which I do appreciate. And I just also, I know it's a lot to ask for, but I think it's still a pretty important event for, for especially if the economy, if we're having a tough winter season and our economy is struggling, like it's huge. We did 4th of July numbers, in the middle of February, and I hadn't seen that in my entire life here.
I mean, just why, kind of participating in meetings as an observer prior to being on the board, it seemed like there was a lot of ask from Ski Join for funds for different things. And it goes back to that, the movie that we haven't seen. I agree. It's, can be a good, revenue generator for that weekend. I strongly agree with Sally, though, that I'd hate to see the town money put in the purse, which is often kind of brought up as like the purse needs to be as big as it will be so that we get the most advanced riders and the best cowboys. And, I don't know, I like town money being used for that. Doesn't seem to jive well with what we're doing. I'm fine with keeping the partner at 5K, and I would imagine that if they are in a bind in February or January, we'll hear from them.
Jim?
Hey, thanks. This is a difficult one because they are a nonprofit. We are partners with them. They are coming and asking for additional money. Being on the board when we had the discussions about the film and the original purposes of the film, and then what was presented, the finished product, knowing that they had a fundraiser, and it was a good fundraiser. When the film was presented to a sold out theater of over, I think it was 68 individuals that showed up for the premiere back in October, a month ago. It served its purpose, and I think it's going to be serving its purpose for years to come, which is providing that true infomercial for our community in the winter season. Make no mistake, it is the July of our winter. It is a 3-day weekend. For all intents and purposes, as far as the amount of money that is brought to this community through the form of food sales, lodging sales, merchandise sales. That is the fact. They fill up all the Airbnbs, they fill up the hotel rooms. So there is a true revenue generation that you can track, and that has been tracked year over year. I am also straight up, I agree with Jeff, that town funds should not be used to increase the purse, increase the amount of prize money that a rider can be awarded. Having that been said, a lot of the riders, whether they're on the horse or they're the skiers being pulled behind, are locals. That's just a fact. But I do not believe that our town's money, our town's tax money, essentially what this is, should be awarded in the form of prize money. If this funding and the original dollar amount that we were kicking around during our finance committee meeting was cutting it in half and calling it 5,000. If that was used for infrastructure or paying for additional services locally, I am all for that. 100% all for that. And providing jobs for individuals that used to be volunteer. The fact of the matter is that it's difficult to find the volunteers for all these organizations. And especially for ski touring, because you're volunteering to stand out in the cold for however many days in a row. And it's pretty darn cold. I would be for providing 5,000, cutting this in half and calling it additional 5, if the rest of the board is up for that. If not, I totally understand. But I think this is another one where we need to be investing in our community members and our community events. And this is the largest winter event. It just is. Well, those are my thoughts and feelings on the subject.
I think everybody presented really good feedback. What do we ultimately want to do with this one? Do you have any
Well,
idea?
I think if we're, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask Gloria, do you have any idea what the value of the town's in-kind contribution is?
That's what I was gonna say.
I'd have to look back through previous memos, but I could try and do that while you guys deliberate.
Because it would be helpful to just quantify what if there's a total dollar amount. I don't know that necessarily changes the amount that we should award them, but it's helpful to know,
Of course.
especially if we were to award on the lower side. I think it would seem less extreme to say we're only doing 5,000, but we're actually really providing $55,000 of value, or whatever the total ends up being.
Yeah, and I believe we had asked for that previously, just to sort of get an idea that way. And same for if we did anything on 4th of July, because these are the type of events that it is nice to know what other monies or what's it worth to the town and what we put towards it, because then it could make it much clearer that we do really support this event. And it shows by the amount of time that we put in with our man hours and our snowplows, and the town staff as well. So.
Well, someone should make a proposal, because we only have one more after this, and then we're on to the next.
I'm comfortable with Jim's idea of funding it at $5,000. I'd like to be sure that we're not funding the purse, and I would prefer that it go toward, I think you used the word, Jim, but the infrastructure of the whole event. So if it's purchasing the timing device, or if it's something that kind of creates the ability to implement this year after year. I can see that. I think we do support this event. We support it. We've supported it mightily in the past. It's something that we're going to continue to support, but and I think $5,000 is in this category is also being combined with the $5,000 from the partnership framework, and so that's really a total of $10,000 plus in-kind contribution, and that's really significant.
I did find our contract. I wasn't able to find an exact amount, but in there it says that the town should pay $5,000 plus provide additional support, labor, assets, resources at no cost to the event, including but not limited to access to public works staff, public works equipment and vehicles. That includes a snowcat, dump truck, and loader operated by town staff, Town of Silverton Public Works staff for a course building and removal, waiver of special event fees for application, banner display, and road closure. And then it says, and more.
It's material.
And I can't seem to find an amount for all of that.
Dana, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I can feel comfortable with what Sally and Jim are proposing. I still am sort of stuck on what the board was told last year as far as marketing and promotion, and this starting to become a more self-sustaining event. Because in my mind, if this is an event that really brings in dollars for businesses and is kind of primarily focused on our tourist community, then again, there might be able to be a point where this does become sustainable on its own. And if we're marketing this to theaters in Durango, as was proposed, or putting this in other outlets with the movie, I just feel a little uncomfortable with continuing to fund it in a nonprofit category and a partner category, as opposed to saying we have a $5,000 committed funding in the partner category and in-kind donation of staff time, labor, and materials. And then really the board doesn't expect that they're getting funded in the nonprofit request as well. And to me, that still does demonstrate support for this event. I mean, I'd like it to be known that when my family went last year, we thought it was the coolest thing we'd all ever seen in our lives. And so I love this event, even as a local, or of course as a local, because it's just so Silverton. But yeah, I just think from what the board has been told in the past, I'd like to see this actually come to fruition as a self-sustaining event, still with some commitment from the town, that the board knows that the ski touring board knows that the town is committing a level of funding and in-kind support, but that we're just not continuing to get a request that's 10,000 or more every year.
So I think that's a good direction to head.
When their own budget indicates that the revenues potentially exceed the expenditures.
So I did find another document here in 2019. We estimated that our total in-kind contributions was $9,820.
Oh, it's not nearly as significant as I was assuming.
Fuel, time,
and then
equipment, labor, no way.
For 3 days.
There's two, here, I'll share the screen with you so you guys can see this, because there's two estimates. It says actual total and estimated total, and one of them includes labor and the other one does not. So I will just share this with you so you can see it somehow. No. Okay, and your screen.
While Gloria's working on that, is anyone opposed to a total town cash contribution of 10K in the form of the 5K we're already committed to as a partner organization, and then 5K here within the nonprofit request?
I support the 5,000.
I support that as well.
Dana and Sally?
Yeah, I support it.
Yep.
Jordan and Jeff? Okay. And then that does seem very, very low. But can we also request that we receive a report from John at the conclusion or sometime, a few weeks after the conclusion of the event with an accounting of how much it actually cost the town in terms of time, equipment, or labor and equipment and materials. Gas.
Okay.
Sweet.
You didn't see what I was typing on my screen. Okay.
So San Juan Development Association, requested amount 5K, last year's award 5K. Recommending taking this out of the nonprofit request and putting it all in partner organization, is that correct?
Yes.
And then fully funding.
Yes, I think that was in the notes. It didn't make it to the amount because I didn't include it as the nonprofit.
Cool. Any objections to that? So it looks like we increased by $6,500 or so. I can't quite see the smaller numbers from here, but looks like we went from 50 something to 57. 50,400 to 57,2 something.
Yep, about.
I hear Dana's argument about really thinking about how we consider, small amounts here and small amounts there, because ultimately, that has the potential to interfere with bigger investments that we may want to make in the assets that we have in town. And I think that somehow cleaning up or tightening up the process a bit and being clear about the requests can help us really make this funding that we put towards nonprofits be as effective as it possibly can and support our community organizations. Because I think the benefit to doing, somewhat spending down our general fund on our nonprofit organizations is they are the best way to reinvest in our community in a lot of ways, because these are the people that are doing so much legwork and they're working so hard and they're recruiting, endless volunteer hours and probably putting in more, mind-blowing hours beyond what they're being paid for. So I do think on top of that, really what they're providing is like the rich fabric of our community. I think I said something like this last year, but I think it is a really good way to invest our money in our community. And it's a way to honor and support organizations that do a really good job year after year, or just kind of trying to get started and get their feet under them. And I think this was really hard last year, and it was really hard again this year, not getting easier. Even though I think that was the goal. I think we were striving for easier.
Does this total thank you, Sally, I totally agree. Does this total reflect the bump up for the creative district, or is it still 7,500 with an asterisk?
It is still 7,500 with an asterisk.
Okay. So seeing that we increased our budget by quite a bit, what do we want to do there? Do we want to fund their full amount and add another $2,500 to the total, or are we keeping them 7,500?
I want to fund their full amount.
Agreed.
Is anybody opposed to funding the full amount?
I think it's just recognizing we didn't have a line item in the spreadsheet for ski drawing, and we just bumped them to 5,000, and we increased the clinic budget. So that's really where the difference comes from, what the finance committee recommended. And I think for the value add to the community, I don't have a problem funding the full amount. And I appreciate, Sally, your point that investing in these organizations is akin to investing in assets in our community as well.
Cool. So it shall be done.
And finance committee, thank you. I didn't say that earlier. I meant to just express my deep gratitude for the hard work that you've done getting us here. I think that framework definitely made it a lot easier to go through and ask some hard questions and make the tough considerations.
Absolutely. Thank you for making this meeting significantly shorter. Cool. Okay, so any further direction or questions or clarification?
No, I will contact the organization in the next couple weeks. Cool. I don't want to commit to tomorrow because I'm kind of busy.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, so our next agenda item is 5D, capital improvement projects and overview of citizen input on prioritizing future capital projects.
After identifying 5 projects outlined in previous plans and in line with trustee priorities and our master plan, the community was given the opportunity to help prioritize those projects for September 14th through October 12th. This was conducted in town hall, so citizens came to town hall and received 5 town bucks to spend on projects they wanted to see prioritized. 83 community members participated in this project, so about 13% of our population. These results were then presented to the Finance Committee and the Facilities, Parks, and Rec Committee. Staff goals for tonight's agenda item is to create a resolution identifying the projects that a committed to future capital line item would be dedicated to. While the memo suggests $25,000 to contribute next year, there's still a lot of work to do to identify the final cost and timeline so that we can work backwards in establishing a schedule for saving and implementing the plans. There are also other funding areas in the budget that can help fund these projects, such as Conservation Trust Fund, which is our cut of the state lottery to be used for parks and recreation services. Once we are given direction from the board on which projects, top 3 or all of them, then we can create a schedule and timeline to present for saving and implementation. Oh, that's it. Okay, that's my spiel. Any questions? Again, I would stress this is a new process trying to establish. We did have a line item that had not been reported before saying future capital projects. So there was $25,000 set aside with no resolution on what that would be spent on. So I'm trying to create something that has already been established, but without parameters. So I'm trying to create those parameters.
My thinking on this has changed a little bit. I think when we last checked in on this, I made the case of kind of combining a couple of these as being similar, and maybe trying to take on 3 or so. But I now think that we should just cut it down to the 2 very obvious majority support items that just had way more votes than the other 3 in order to try and make sure that they actually happen in a relatively short period of time. I think if we say all of them, or even if we pick 3 or 4 of them, it strains capacity and makes it less likely for us to get something done. And then if we pick those top 2 to prioritize, we're likely to make progress faster. So my recommendation is, even though it was only, a small percentage of the overall community, I feel like the distinct number of votes for the Silverton Perimeter Trail and Riverwalk relative to the other 3 just stands out a lot, that they likely have a large amount of community support throughout the whole community. But I'm curious to hear what everybody else thinks. So.
I would agree. Focusing on those 2 first makes the most sense to me too.
So to understand this from a bigger picture, we had these 5 things that people could vote on. These came, obviously, we didn't just pull these out of a hat. These have been things that have been community input for a long time. And so now we're going to pick these, and we're going to essentially go for them, prioritize them, and try to accomplish them without sort of looking at other things as other projects, other projects.
I mean, that's not to say that we're not looking at other projects. So one thing you don't see on here is Kendall. But that is kind of already in the works that we're working on that asset. So these are projects that we haven't put on the books yet. So if you think of some stuff like updating our code, like that's already in the works. And what we did here was hearing from the community that we had all these plans and we weren't executing them. We took a look at all the plans that we had and we said, what's the next step to execute these plans? And how, and does that next step fall in line with the trustee priorities and with the master plan? And that's how we came to these projects here.
I mean, I see this as like, you know, when I look at the votes, I look at them like trails, like in my opinion, like that's where, like, whether, maybe I'm totally wrong, but whether the community news, like exactly what the Silverton Preliminary Trail is or the Riverwalk, those are very like picking trails. And obviously we've seen a lot of support for the Single Track Society. I don't have any problem with this and like with looking at moving forward towards those things. I mean, you know, and you hear Dana blue in the face and I know we're working on it, but of course, like skating is something that we've brought up in the community. It's part of, that must be part of the Kendall more looped. So it's more looped into the Kendall process. And that's why we're not seeing it on something like this.
Right. And also there was not an existing plan sitting on the shelf that had that identified in it that we could pull from for people to review and vote on. And I would say like wastewater, of course, that's a priority and something that we're working towards. But it's not something that we necessarily would go to the community and ask them to prioritize over trails.
Totally.
So that's something that we're already working on. And that's kind of why we came up with these, because these aren't they've been identified as priorities in the past through past plans, and we're bringing them back up to make sure that we're doing that touch point with the community on what we should be budgeting for.
Yeah, I think, Jeff, I appreciate your question. And I think from what the community said through this process, prioritizing these top two makes a lot of sense. I think it's really in line with what came out of the master plan process and how people were thinking about how we use our assets and our land. It relates to the Kendall RMPP discussion. So I feel pretty comfortable with prioritizing these. I think for me, as I think about our budget, and I think from what you said, Gloria, it doesn't necessarily fit within this capital improvement projects line item, just making sure that we are setting aside money to move forward with the things we can at Kendall or at our other assets. So if that's, putting some planning money to identify where could we put a multi-purpose pavilion that could be a summer skate park and a summer events facility and a winter skating facility, let's start planning for that. The community has been asking for those kinds of assets. Let's start putting some money into our budget, not necessarily here, but somewhere else, as we start to think about where could we put something like that? How could we survey it? And how could we move forward with some investing in some of those assets? So I feel very comfortable with prioritizing these top two from what the community feedback was that we got, and also thinking about, as we invest in our further parks assets, what are some of those low-hanging fruits that we could allocate some of our surplus to?
Anyone else want to weigh in? How about you, Tyler? I'm going Socratic.
No, I understand, especially where Jeff was coming from, but I just feel like we are trying to take care of those other projects, and it just, the way that we classified things as you know, these are our town projects, these are our Kendall projects. Like, we just need to be real clear with the community that we're still working on other stuff. This is just one particular aspect of what we're working on, but we're working on multiple projects at once, and we're just doing the best we can. So.
Sally.
I was on this committee that discussed how to approach the capital improvement projects, and I think we had a really good discussion in that meeting, and I continue to think that because the top two projects that were identified by the community just far received significantly more votes than any of the other projects, that I think it makes sense that we focus on those top two. And because of the alignment between them, I think it makes potentially leveraging other funding sources more available to us. And then also I think it streamlines staff time potentially as we work on them. So I very much support working on those top two projects initially. And since it's our first time out of the gate on this one, let's just, I'd like to advocate for not overcomplicating or spreading ourselves too thin on this one. See what we can do and see how the staff, check back in with the staff on it and just get a sense of how that works for them. I think in the bigger picture of like these other projects that we're talking about, we are going to invest, or again, we have it budgeted to fix the deck at Kendall. And I think if we can check some of those, that's a big item. I think it's up at $175,000 in our budget to reinvest in. I know we're looking at it as Kendall maintenance, but I think hopefully with a smart design, it can feel a little bit more beyond maintenance and function a little bit better for the community. But it'd be nice to check that one off the list and get that deck fixed and see what else we can do over there for sure.
Awesome, thank you. Jim?
Can I add real quick too?
Yeah,
I was just going to say quick comment too on kind of the improvements for signage and for our wayfinding experience for our community and our visitors. Just reminding folks that we are trying to move forward with designs for entrance monuments. And so that is a piece that we are kind of paying attention to, that component of requests from the community.
Very helpful context, thank you. Jim?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. Two highest vote getters. This is what the town is, and our community is obviously looking to fund and piggyback on and move forward with. So I think we should do it. I think it's a no-brainer. Move forward with those two, knowing that other projects are other projects, and we're not going to overpower staff with all these. I think we're fine. I'm all for it.
Awesome. Jordan, you want to throw us sideways?
I'm good.
Cool. Any other things to add?
No, I don't think so.
And Jeff, do you feel like you have clarity on the, like, kind of what we're, like how this kind of fits in the matrix of everything else?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not totally sure how to get new things into the matrix, which is something that I'm trying to figure out for myself and how I can, like, in a bigger role in all of it. But like, I understand how we're here, how we're where we are right now. And I definitely support moving forward on these projects. I just would like to understand more, like, how to bring in other things.
And this can always be added to as well. The goal really is, it's a housekeeping goal to make sure that we have a line item, especially a capital improvements item. First of all, that it's shown in our budget moving forward, which it hasn't been, and that it has parameters. And you can always add to those parameters or take those parameters away. But for audit purposes and for transparency purposes, if we are saving up for something, we should be defining exactly what we're saving for.
What's that big table that kind of ranks the priorities of like all of the major projects that are happening? I think it may be a county level document, but it also includes all the town projects.
I know which one you're talking about. I haven't seen it since I started, but I know which one you're talking. It's not CIP, but it's like
something like that.
Yeah.
I think related to Jeff's question, I'd be curious, and I feel like we see it twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, I'm not pulling it off the top of my head, but I think it'd be interesting as a follow-up to find out like how do things get added to that, and how can we be involved in the next iteration of that update. Because I think that's where a lot of the new, I mean, that's a bigger picture thing where like new stuff getting added to that is like the entire like town county like ranking of priorities. It includes infrastructure stuff like broadband, as well as more specific things like Kendall or you know, like road maintenance stuff, but then also introducing like new capital projects here can be done a lot of different ways. It could be done through public comment. It could be done, you know, through request to Gloria. So if you have ideas for stuff that we're not talking about.
And that was definitely an option with these funds. I guess the staff took it upon themselves to try and develop this program based off of previous plans and implementing previous plans.
I think it's, and I can see where you're bringing this from, and it's answering the question of like, we have all this stuff we never finish,
right? Which
is feedback we've gotten a lot of, and so let's finish some stuff.
It's the Community Development Action Plan, CDAP, which is
that's it.
Which is facilitated by Region 9.
Yeah. You know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but I know we talk about this a lot with our core Public Works Department and Facilities and Parks and Rec Department, that they are the most direct service departments, and that we all, I think, as trustees, get a lot of comments about what's happening here and what's happening there and what can we expect here. And I know, Gloria, you've done such an incredible job to institute really some much better goal setting and planning and organizational accountability on all levels for staffing. And I wonder if maybe just a once a year exercise, maybe we do this through a committee, or we do this as part of the like goal setting process for trustees and admin and the administrator, but just, you know, maybe it would benefit the community to hear what is kind of the 1 year goal for certain projects around facilities, parks and rec, or public works, or the 5 year goal. Because I think people worry about the big questions around wastewater and water treatment and all of that. And they worry about, well, what are we doing with our senior center modular, or at Kendall, or with our baseball field, or ice skating? And we talk about it in some of our meetings, but we don't really give folks kind of an overview of what we're hoping for. And we get updates from all of our departments, but I guess I'm just kind of thinking of a better way for us to communicate out as a board and as staff for some of these departments that are so public facing and that we get a lot of questions about. I don't know. So I'm just putting that out there. Committee based, department based, just as a pin for something to talk about in the future.
Cool. Okay, so it sounds like we have consistent direction to prioritize the Silverton Perimeter Trail and the Riverwalk. And are you also seeking direction with respect to the budget considerations that were included in this memo?
Yeah, and so we suggested the 25,000 to start with. There is already 25 in there to start building that fund towards those projects.
Gotcha. And it says in the memo that the town can afford to increase this contribution up to $200,000. Is that at some point in the future, or is that now?
That is now according to our current budget constraints, if you wanted to spend down our entire fund balance.
But it sounds like we probably shouldn't, and that we don't yet have specific things planned to spend that money on for these two projects, because we're not quite there yet.
Right. So from here, what our next steps would be to kind of suss out the final cost of all of these, do a timeline of when we would think they would be completed, and then work backwards from there of how we can budget for each year. Our goal is a 5-year plan. So implementing these within 5 years, and how we could work back from that to make those happen.
Got it. So what we're looking at is $50,000 line item for 2023 for the planning of these projects. Also, we have $55,000 in the conservation trust fund that can go towards these.
Correct.
And there's also the potential to get brownfield grant funding.
Yes.
And then we could leverage the funds we do have as matching funds for those brownfield grant funds.
Correct. That would be the most ideal way, is to leverage these funds with more funds.
Got it.
Maybe GoCo, maybe other.
Is everyone clear on all of that and okay with moving from the $25,000 budget line item to a $50,000 budget line item, but not going all the way to $200,000? Cool. Okay. And then in this memo, which I know is prepared for a few meetings ago, it also had the cemetery fence topic in it. And since this was in our packet, I just want to kind of restate that we had the conversation about getting more input from the committee. Is that right?
Yes, so it was requested that we hold a work session with the cemetery committee to discuss the fence, but I did want to put this in here because it was part of the citizen participation. Yep. So if any citizens were wondering where their votes went, they can come here and see.
Cool. So that is still in the works. Perfect. Any other direction or feedback that would be helpful?
That's it. You'll be looking for a resolution in the coming weeks that will outline these parameters for this budget line item and make our job easier for auditing in the future. Awesome. And also, you'll also see now that we'll have a committed to future capital in our general fund.
Awesome. Any other trustee input on this before we move on? Okay. Moving on to our last regular meeting topic, which is the Columbine Park material cost update.
Matt, can you promote Todd both to panelists? Thank you.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Hey, Todd.
Hey, so I think the memo probably does a better job of the exact figures explaining what exactly is going on and what the consideration is. We estimate to save some money in some areas, such as the lumber package, et cetera. This is really an effort to be transparent and kind of keep the board informed as to what's going on. We are cautiously optimistic that the savings for this window package, where we were a little light on the estimate, will be recouped in other areas, but staff was not comfortable approving this purchase and kind of crossing our fingers and hoping it remained on budget. So the risk is there that if these funds were not recouped, we may be slightly over budget. But when we kind of entered into this construction, there was a very clear understanding from the board that these types of considerations would go to the board for ultimate approval. This is the first situation where we've encountered that, and I'd be happy to field any questions related to it or clarify anything in the memo.
Any questions for Todd?
No, I would just comment that in this current climate, I think, you know, we're going to see some cost overruns in some areas, and like you said, hopefully some savings in other ones. And I think the price of building a yeah. Thanks for the nice and clear memos, Todd. Appreciate it.
I agree. We knew this was going to happen. We knew, obviously, the climate that we're living in. Keep it going, man. Got to get it finished.
Yeah.
I appreciate the update, Todd. Thank you. I think it helps with transparency for the community and just keeping it before the board. So I appreciate the memo.
I've never ever nailed my budget on doors on a project also. So I saw that and it actually made me kind of chuckle a little bit. And it was nice to see that other people have just as much trouble figuring out how to budget for doors as I have. They're always like so much more expensive than you think they're going to be.
Particularly in commercial applications, it's pretty amazing the total expense.
Yeah, fire rated doors or metal doors are so expensive. Cool. Anything else on this today? Awesome. Thank you, Todd.
Absolutely. Outside of this consideration, we do feel we're on budget and on schedule. So things are going well.
Nice. Awesome. Is there anything the board can do to better support this project or any other direction or feedback that you'd be looking for?
Not at this time, and any other similar considerations will certainly be brought back to this forum for consideration.
Great. All right, that was our last.
Do we need to give direction to approve, or that was enough?
There's just an update, I think.
There's a motion or direction.
Is there?
Yeah.
My bad.
We just wanted to make sure that
you all
were okay with it.
My bad. Yes, that would be great.
I'd like to make a direction to approve the purchase from Barefoot Garage Doors, DMK Doors. I'm going to Colby.
Well, I think direction doesn't need to be in the form of formal motion. It's just, you know, we generally have consensus to move forward with this. No one objects. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're good there.
No problem.
I definitely skipped that. Cool. That was the last. The only other thing I want to say before we move on is we didn't do trustee updates at the last meeting, and that didn't make it into this agenda. And I just wanted to thank all of the people that ran for the county commissioner position for throwing their hat in the ring to contribute to the community. And I wanted to congratulate Pete Meisel for getting elected and once again serving the community in a public role. So thank you, everybody. Congratulations, Pete. I don't know if anybody else had a trustee update they wanted to share before we go to public comment.
I just wanted to thank all of you for hanging in there. We've had a lot of long meetings with a lot of details discussed, and I think this board has been very productive, collegial, and really thoughtful. And so I appreciate serving with all of you.
Sweet. Well, awesome. This was a really good meeting. Thank you, everybody. We'll now go to public comment. We don't have anyone in person, so anyone on Zoom, please raise your hand and we'll promote your panelists. Please introduce yourself and we'll set the 3-minute timer up. Hi, Melody. Once you unmute yourself, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me now?
You can.
I do appreciate the last, I guess this is one huge meeting in 2 weeks, because you've gone through a tremendous amount of decision making. And I do think as a group, you all make good decisions and have good discussions. It may not be my decision, but you seem to be representing a large part of the town and not, say, an individual. And I think that that's really good. The other thing is, I have to admit, after all of the years I've lived here, having a list of projects to be done and putting a small amount of money towards a couple of individual ones will actually give hope that we're going to pay attention to the lists we've worked on, because there's too many things that don't get funded ever, and they just get swept away by a new idea. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate everything you do. Bye.
Thank you. It doesn't look like we have any other public comment at this time, so we'll close public comment. The time is 8:21 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye.